Okay, here we are. Exciting, exciting. We have another Ancient Mysteries episode, which I think it's quite obvious they're my favourites. So we have a special guest today. It's Mary, and Mary I met in Byron Bay when I was living up there, and we've basically become sisters now, and she's a part of the family. And we were filming this episode, and I thought it would be perfect to have you join us. So yes, and you're going to be coming on for a regular episode, I believe. Maybe.
She will.
So on this episode, I'm talking about something that I've mentioned briefly before in a previous Ancient Mysteries, and it's about this interesting anomaly that we find in ancient Egypt, or well, like Egypt today, but that dates back to ancient Egypt, which are called Stargates. And
yes, I remember you talking about them.
Yeah, I briefly mentioned them in our ancient Egypt episode, but I didn't go too in depth with it, mostly because the information on them that I've found is very limited, but also because I just didn't feel like they deserved a whole episode until I found this out, like, that I'm going to share with you.
A piece of information.
A story, if you will.
Did you know that there is a series on TV called Stargate?
Yes, I have. I've seen like some interesting clips of it.
Yes.
And they like talk ancient Egyptian in it and everything, yeah. So, I feel like I should start with how I first heard about ancient Egyptian Stargates, because I'd never heard of them before until I was watching this video by this woman on YouTube. She's amazing. Her name, or like YouTube handle, is Funny Old World, and I'll link it in the description. But basically she went to ancient Egypt, and she was on this tour where everyone kind of believed, like everyone was there to discover more about ancient Egypt, and everyone was very open about other possibilities than the mainstream answers to things. But on this tour, there was also professionals like geologists, archaeologists, people who actually are professionals in, I guess, some of the institutions in archaeology and discoveries and stuff. So even though she was an amateur, there was other people on the tour that weren't and actually knew a lot about what was happening. Anyway, they came across in the video, she showed that they came across these, what they call Stargates. And the reason why they're called Stargates is because on the actual gate itself, it has the hieroglyphs that translate to Stargate. Like, that's what they translate to. So it's not like, oh, we're just making this up. Like, that's what they were called to the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
So the hieroglyph on them is called Stargate, and there's matching sets in a couple of sites around Egypt. So there's the ones that I know of are at Karnak and also at the Ramesseum, and they're like these two sites in Egypt. And there's also some connections to Stargates and the temple in Abydos, and that's what we're going to get into today, is all around Abydos. But I first wanted to talk a little bit more about the other gates, the physical gates, because this is the physical evidence that we have around
of what?
Stargates, and the potential that these were portals or some kind of like incredible ancient technology that we cannot even fathom. Something that kind of breaks the wall in space and time and allows you to travel to different places.
Which is what the show actually proposes.
And we all know predictive programming.
Yes.
Or, we all know that. So, yes. Disclosure. So, basically there's these different sets in these two temples that this woman on YouTube shows. And these sets, there's I think there's at least 5 within these two temples, and they're matching, apparently. So there's like, for every one gate, there's another gate that matches. But the thing that makes people go crazy about these Stargates is not around the fact that they're called Stargates. That is nothing to do with the weirdness. The weirdness that lies within these Egyptian Stargates is the fact that the stone inside the pillar is melted, but
yes,
the
I remember you
outside
telling me.
of the stone is completely intact. So it's like there was a huge energy force that hit these gates. And so how they look is like, imagine a doorway of like a stone doorway that you can just kind of walk through. That's what it looks like. And the inside of this stone it's a granite stone, and I've looked it up, and the melting point of granite is at least 1,215 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
1,215 degrees Celsius, and it doesn't make any sense when it comes to melting. Like, it doesn't make any sense that the outside is completely fine and the inside is something's happened. And she was saying...
On all the Stargates are all the same?
Yeah. At least what Funny Old World showed on YouTube. And what she showed was, like, actual physical, like...
footage.
Filming what these were, and she had geologists on the tour, and geologists were completely baffled by how this could occur, because it's just not a natural erosion of any kind. And another thing that kind of adds more to the query of this is that there's no... So, like, these doorways, these Stargates, they're built into a wall almost. Like, there's also limestone sitting, like, right next to it. Like, they're touching. But the limestone's completely fine as well. Like, all the stone around it is completely intact. Well, I mean...
Yeah.
As far as temperature goes, and...
They're not melted.
Yeah, they're not melted. I mean, they're definitely eroded because it's, how many thousands of years in the past. But as far as this erosion that is inside these Stargates, there's nothing that has touched any other stone. It's only on the Stargates, the things that have the Stargate hieroglyph on it, and it just doesn't make any sense why or how this stone ended up like this. Like, it just doesn't make any...
And are there any other examples of this type of melting inside a stone anywhere else in history?
Not that I know of, but also I've just looked into Egyptian Stargates. I haven't done the research to other places, but that's a very good question, and I'm interested to know myself, so I'll look into that. But I haven't seen anything. Like, when I'm doing my research, usually if there's something similar in history, the articles or the people who are writing, they'll mention this is also seen in this culture, or here is another example in history. But I haven't seen that, but that doesn't mean it's not out there. So it's just very odd, and there's no way that I can think to explain it, or that geologists, at least the geologists that have seen it, because again, this isn't something that is just like, oh, let's research this, let's have a look, let's get all the geologists on this, because they know that if they do that, what are the geologists going to say,
Yeah, and it's just interesting to me that something that is such an anomaly and seems quite incredible isn't more widely known about.
Yeah.
Like a stone that is melted on the inside but not on the outside.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that is like a wonder of the world, like a miracle almost?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like things like that, maybe they don't want us to speak about it, because...
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just really weird that, like, I found out about this through a girl on YouTube, and she only found out about it because she was on a specific tour filled with people who were also interested in discovering the secrets of ancient Egypt. And it's not like this is something that you find on a generic tour or that people talk about which surprises me because this is exciting. Like, as an Egyptologist, I would love to have things that we don't know and look at this mystery.
So much.
Yeah, there's so
much.
There
is so much that we don't know.
Yeah, especially around ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt is a complete mystery to modern humans, and we try and put answers on things and brush it off. Like, I know for me in school, like, you just had like a couple weeks of learning about it. I remember looking at it in the textbooks, and they had this diagram of how they think that the pyramids were built, and it was with a ramp. And then later on in life, I'm like, you know, looking into Graham Hancock and into a lot more of like the people who are posing these important questions and giving the scientific evidence, and it is completely impossible to be doing it with a ramp, because if you did it with a ramp, you would have to have a 5-degree incline in order to like physically be able to move the stones up. So a 5-degree incline is the maximum amount that you would need for a ramp to be built. And if you had a 5-degree ramp, that ramp would have to be fucking long. Like, it would have to go
to get that high.
Yeah, to get that high as the pyramids. Like, because you got to think about it. Like, a 5-degree incline is like literally that, and it just has to keep going until like it reaches the height of the pyramid, and it would still be there today.
It's so funny that to me it's just so funny, as in like not funny.
Yeah.
That they're telling school kids this at school, expecting them to not question it.
Yeah.
I never saw it in school. I never talked about Egypt at all.
Oh, really?
We did, but it wasn't to, like, they didn't explain. They basically said, we don't know how they built the pyramids.
Yeah. Well, they
That's
didn't
what they
for
said.
me. There was like a whole thing about ramps and how they built, and levees and
They said, when I was growing up at school, they said, we think it could be this, but we don't really know.
yeah.
And I think that really is the best answer, because it's the truth.
Yeah.
It really is the truth. Like, it's not telling us everything that they know.
Yeah.
But if they really wanted people not to ask questions, that's what they should say, because then you go, oh, well, we don't know. So
Yeah.
you kind of leave it at that.
Yeah.
But thinking that kids are going to believe that it's a 5-degree angle to get the ramp up to the top of the pyramid, they're going to say to themselves, wow, that must be some decently long ramp.
Yeah.
I don't think that people understand how big the rocks actually is.
Yeah.
Are.
And how many?
They were far away.
Yes.
They had to bring them
They were,
far.
oh my gosh, they were
And
500 miles
that's why
away.
people go to Egypt to actually see what they're talking about.
We as humans cannot perceive a million physical things.
Yeah.
Like, there's millions, not a million, there's millions of stones in these pyramids that come from 500 miles away. Millions. I just don't understand how they could. And they say that it was built in 20 years. Like, get absolutely effed. I don't care. You are. And then I was talking with my colleague about it, because I don't know, I talk about this stuff with any opportunity that I can with anyone. And he's like a very mainstream believer, let's just say that. And he was like, oh, they brought it over on boats. And I'm like, have you seen ancient Egyptian boats? They are like, there's no way they could carry. They would have to carry like maybe 5 stones, if that, not even, like maybe 2, and per boat. Imagine.
But this is the thing, isn't it? The people that don't question, that don't think about it, they're not. They just go, oh well, they brought it over on boats. That's it. Full stop. You know, like, they're not, like, actually, because we're not experiencing it when we weren't there.
Yeah.
And we have our modern context.
Yeah.
In our own minds, we think, well, that's possible to bring some stones over on a boat.
Yeah.
But how big are the stones and how big are the boats?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't ask myself those questions.
No, of course.
It's not until you started saying things to me that I kind of went, oh, yeah, Like, if you really think about that, that sounds crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. There's so much like that we don't know. And another thing, before I get to the main story of today, another thing that I wanted to mention is that the quarries that they were taking these stones out of, they were not easily like navigated. Like, I'm trying to think of the word, but you couldn't get in and out of these
Quarries.
these quarries very easily. Like, it was very rocky terrain. It was like, imagine going on a hike through like boulders and rocks and stuff. It's not a smooth, flat, easy to navigate place. Like, there's almost like big.
So you're thinking, how the hell did they get these rocks out of there?
But also, like, why would they do them where they are? Like, why did they have to bring it over there?
Yeah.
Is it so far from everything? They would have just made it.
Well, there was
else.
some important reason, because they went to a lot of effort.
Yeah, to bring it all the way over there. And coming from quarries that were not, like, easy to get stone out of. Like, it wasn't an easy task by any means. And they weren't just getting, like, stones from the pyramids from these quarries. They were making obelisks, like huge obelisks out of these.
I remember you saying how the accuracy of how the stones were cut too.
Oh yeah. The stone,
how they fit together, and the accuracy of how these angles were fitting together, and
it is the amount of nuances that go into everything in ancient Egypt. Pyramids, obelisks, statues, everything that goes into their art, and I will call it art because to me that is what it is incomprehensible. Like, even now that I've done research and I've looked at it up and I've seen it with my eye, well, I've seen it on a screen with my eyes, but yeah,
which still can...
I've seen the math is what I was trying to say. Like, I've seen the math of this. I still can't even begin to comprehend, like, the work that went into it. And it is physically inhuman. Like, it's just inhuman what they've done.
So you mean superhuman?
Yeah, superhuman. It's just like, it doesn't add up with chisels. And it's actually a huge, to me, it's almost offensive that they, to the human race, like the modern human race, of saying, oh yeah, they did it with chisels. Like, it's offensive to our own minds, that, and we believe it though.
Yeah.
Like, it's...
Well, that's why they do it, because if they can get away with it, with the least possible effort, that's what they do. Yeah. It's up to us to ask the questions.
Yeah.
It's up to us to notice, okay, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because they're not just going to come out and say, oh yeah, here is all the information on a silver platter.
Yeah. So, now we get to the big story that I love and kind of what inspired me to want to do this episode. So, there was this temple built in 1290 BC, and this temple was called the Temple of Abydos, or Temple of Seti, and it was in Abydos.
Yeah, right.
And it was built by Pharaoh Seti I, and his mission in life during his rule was to bring back the old gods of ancient Egypt and bring back the old, I don't want to say religion, but philosophy, yeah. Bring back the old gods, because I think during that time there was like this new thing of there was now one god, but in ancient times there was like all these different gods, and it was like each god had a temple, and like there was all these different ways of worshipping things, and kind of everything had its place. Anyway, so his whole mission during his rule was to bring back the old gods. And so he set out to build this temple, and it had like 7 different rooms. It was huge, and like it was basically to pay tribute to all the old gods, and like you would go to this temple, this part of the temple, I guess, and it would be about this god or for this
An
purpose.
altar sort of thing.
Yeah, and it would have like different spaces in it. There was like 7 chapels is the word, I guess. Anyway, later down the line, obviously through time and through history, it gets destroyed, and this is where the story really begins. So there was this woman called, her name now as we know her is Seti, but her actual name that she was born with is like Dorothy Eady or Dorothy 80 or something. And basically this woman is incredible. She had this huge vision after she was around 3 years old, and she like fell down these stairs, and after she fell down, like she apparently, according to her parents, had died. And then when the doctor left, like the doctor was like, sorry, your daughter's dead, and then he left, and then all of a sudden she came back alive, and they called back the house doctor after 30 minutes, and the doctor was like, oh my god, didn't know what was going on. But when she came back to life, she was not the same person again. And by the way, this is a totally real woman, I'm not making this up, you can Google her, it's an incredible story. And she like had a different accent. She could still speak English, but it wasn't in her normal voice. And she kept saying things to her parents like, take me home, when she was in her home, and her parents were like confused of, you are home, why are you saying this? And she was just not her usual self before. And then when she was about 4 years old, her parents took her to the British Museum, because she's originally from England. So her parents took her to the British Museum, and they took her to the Ancient Egypt exhibition. And there was a photo of this temple, this old temple that has gone to ruins now. And the temple of Abydos that I mentioned before. And she looked at the photo of it, and she was like, that's my home, that's my home. And she even asked her parents, where's all the plants, and where's all the gardens, and like, where's all the water? This is my home. And her parents didn't really know what she was talking about, and she was like running around the exhibit, like hailing the statues that were there, and like worshipping, and like her parents thought she was basically crazy, like discouraging her behavior. But again, at this time she was only around 4 years old, so I guess it could be just like, oh, my child is a strange child. But yeah, so after her parents took her to this exhibition, she would like then take herself as much as possible, and she knew now like that this was her home before, and she had this whole recollection of ancient Egypt, and she had a past life in ancient Egypt, and she believed in her past life. It was so vivid for her, and I believe for her that she had this past life, and you will too by the end of this. But she was so strong about her beliefs and her visions that she went to an all-girl Catholic school, and in one of the hymns they like say in the hymn like darn the Egyptians or darn the sword Egyptians in it, and she refused to say this hymn, and they expelled her because she wouldn't say it. She wouldn't sing the hymn, and apparently like she threw a textbook at her teacher and stuff because she just did not want to say it. So she was really strong in this, whatever this was for her, you know. And she eventually caught the attention of like an Egyptologist, because she would always be in the museum, and he encouraged her to also become an Egyptologist. And eventually she even moved to Egypt and married an Egyptian and had a son, and called the son Seti after the pharaoh who built the temple. And then that's when her name Seti came from, because Seti in Egyptian means the mother of Seti. So yeah, and this is where her story actually blows my mind. So, as I mentioned before, the temple was in ruins, and the thing was, people like Egyptologists, they wanted to rebuild this temple for tourism. They wanted to kind of refurbish it in a way, like bring it back together. But they didn't know how, because this temple was in ruins. It had been spread across, you know, the whole place, and there was a pillar here and they didn't know where the pillar went, and like it was just a puzzle that they had to put together. This is where Seti comes in, because she, in her visions of this past life, she was a priestess that used to be, like, obviously be a priestess in this temple, and she like helped build this temple with her visions of her past life living there. And they managed to rebuild this temple in like 2.5 years, which like sounds like, oh, that seems reasonable. They should have taken 20 years.
Because they didn't know where anything was.
They didn't, yeah, it would have to be trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. Like, it's like putting a giant puzzle piece together. Like, it's not easy to do. It would take so long. But with her help, it took 2.5 years. And this was how strong she knew her information. Like, there was this guy who worked with the like antiquities committee of Egypt, and he was sent to basically, before the project started, to test if like she was actually gonna, like, I mean, because you think she's crazy.
Yeah.
And so like he basically ran this test with her to see if she actually knew things about the temple before she was at, they brought her to the temple and she hadn't been there before. And he would describe to her like hieroglyphs that were on the walls that of the temple that was like still intact, obviously. And she would like listen to what he was saying. So he would be like, okay, so here there's a picture of a Pharaoh Seti doing this on the wall. Where is that? Take me to where this is. And she would take him to where this like hieroglyph was that he described. And he did it over and over and over and over again. And every single time she did so without fail and without even like being nervous or anything. Like, she just knew. And no one knows how that was possible, because it wasn't like she could just go online and have a look at where these locate. Like, there was no public information on this yet. So she definitely knew what she was talking about. Anyway, so she helped build this whole temple back to restoration. And as people and researchers and Egyptologists are going to this temple, they see that there's a lot of strange hieroglyphs. And this is where it ties into Stargates, because there's like these images of this really weird bell-shaped tower almost, and it looks very like highly technological if you look at it from a modern perspective. Like, you have no idea what this thing is. Like, it's just so strange, and it's blue in color. And on the opposite wall there's like these connections and symbols that connect to like a wormhole, which is really weird. And I don't know, it's just very highly technological. And now, I don't know about there being any physical stargates like the ones I previously described from the other two temples, but Seti, the one who built this whole thing, would say in confidence with her friends and with her close loved ones, I guess, she would speak about how this temple was originally a Stargate. It was like its whole purpose was to transport you to different places, and it was a Stargate temple basically. And she never said this outwardly to, I guess, the public, because she was also very well respected in the scientific community at this point, because she was very much, I mean, she built a whole temple. Like, I mean, she didn't do it, but physically,
she put it back together.
Yeah, she put it back together, and she basically proved everyone wrong with her visions and stuff. And so she gained a lot of respect. She was even in like a National Geographic documentary where they failed to mention anything about her past life regression story thing. Like, they never mentioned her visions or anything like that. But yeah, so she was very well respected, so she never outwardly said this, but
so how do we know it now?
Because of a documentary that I watched that talked about her, and I'm assuming had connections to her loved ones or maybe to her background. And yeah, so she spoke about Stargates and how...
Did she say she'd ever travelled?
No, so her story, do you want to hear her Egyptian story?
Yeah, a little bit.
So it's not very long, but basically what happened was, I'll get up my notes. So I told you about the stairs and all that, but what happened in her Egyptian life basically was she was the daughter of a vegetable seller. Her mum was the vegetable seller, and her dad was like a soldier for Pharaoh Seti. And when she was 3 and we're talking about Egypt,
yeah.
When she was 3, she, like, her mum died, and her dad couldn't afford to, I guess, care for her, and so he gave her up to the temple of Abydos. And it was there when she was like 12, and she, became like a priestess, said her vows, and these vows included, basically, she couldn't have any, like, she had to be a virgin, she couldn't do anything with guys, like, she was
like a nun.
Yeah, she was like a nun, kind of. She had a lot of vows, and I think it was all to the goddess Isis, if I remember correctly. And yeah, so what happened was she met the pharaoh Seti at the temple, because remember, this is his temple. He was the one who, like, commissioned it. So he would visit the temple, and they met when she was a bit older, and they fell in love, and they had a child. She fell pregnant, and she knew that if she was found out, I don't know if she already had been found out, or she knew if she had been found out that they would basically execute her. And so she decided she would decide her own fate, and she committed suicide, basically.
Oh.
Because she didn't want to, trigger warning, I forgot to add that. But yeah, she...
It's a bit late now.
It's a bit late, but yeah. She didn't want to die by the hands of these rules, I'm guessing, and she was like, I'm not going to do that, I'll just...
Well, what happened to the child?
Obviously, she hadn't had it yet.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah, so I think what she said actually was part of this restoration of this temple was to pay for the sins of her last life, as I think the name, it's a bit of a funny name, but her Egyptian name was Ben Treshit. It's Bentresyt. Yeah. So, it was like all of an ode to...
And that's probably why she called her son after the pharaoh.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
And then she became mother of Seti, which is really interesting.
Mm.
Like a huge full circle.
Yeah.
So, that's the story of this temple and of Stargates, and I don't know, I just thought it was such a beautiful, interesting story to share.
Mm. Awesome.
Yeah.
I love how it ties back to a previous episode.
Yeah.
That we were talking about the stones and how they were melted inside.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. So during your research, have you found out have they given an explanation for why the stones are the way they are now? Melted inside and not on the outside?
No.
Nobody knows?
Well,
somebody knows.
Somebody knows, but also I think a lot of the people that do know, they don't like to tell people.
Mm.
Like, okay, side story, there's this castle called Coral Castle in Florida, and this dude built this whole thing with like 3 ton, 4 ton, I don't know how much a ton is, but heavy, right? Like so heavy that it's not physical for one person to lift it up, and he's like lifting these stones like up.
He is?
Yeah, by himself. Like, basically he built this whole Coral Castle. He built this whole site with these huge stones by himself, and he would do it at night when no one's watching. Creepy dude. And he
because he didn't want people to see the super strength.
Yeah, well, no, the thing was, people asked him, how on earth did you do this? And he was like, I know the secrets of the pyramids.
Oh.
And he just didn't tell anyone. It was like, then share with the class, please. But also, I think...
Sounds like levitation.
Yeah. He might have thought that if he told people, then he would...
Yeah.
Because that's what they tend to do, is just shut them up as efficiently as possible. Yeah, so, I don't know. I think people out there know, but they just don't want to share it because they're scared to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Because if I knew, I probably wouldn't tell the public. It
probably...
depends what my position is, but I feel like...
But it would be, I think it would be a futile act anyway, because...
Who's going to believe you?
Well, one, who's going to believe you? And two, the information isn't going to be allowed to go very far.
Yeah.
And you probably are risking your life.
Yeah.
By saying things that you shouldn't be saying.
Yeah.
Because there are ways and means.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, but the stone thing is very odd. And if someone has any answers, share them, please. I personally think, what I think is that this Stargate channeled really strong energy, and it would be like inside the stone. That's what I think. I think it was a conduit of like something really strong.
Well, look, if we think about that principle, look at electricity.
Yeah, like
electricity
wires.
runs through wires.
Yeah.
And look at the internet, it's waves. Look at radio, that's waves as well. We can't see the waves, but we can hear the radio.
Yeah.
Like there's all sorts of forces of nature.
Yeah.
That you can't see, and if somebody came in a time machine from the past to now, and you tried to explain the internet to them, they'd be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Yeah, or even television or radio or any of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really weird how life works. Like, yeah, just that it's all floating around us. Yeah.
So,
that's it. Any
beautiful.
questions?
I think we've asked a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Juliet.
Oh, good.
I enjoyed that.
I'm excited for the next one.
Do you have a sneak peek?
Well, I'm thinking there's a lot. I've got a few ideas. I'm thinking one could be around the history of, like, hell.
Oh.
The history of hell and how the concept came to
I was just
us.
thinking about that, like, while you were talking.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because I've done a little bit, very, very light looking into it. And,
Doesn't it come from
completely
religion?
Fake. No, but I'm talking about where in religion it came from.
Right.
Because, spoiler alert, the Bible originally had no mentions of hell in it.
Yeah,
it was
right.
only with the King James version that hell was introduced. The original Bible,
Yeah.
nothing to do with hell. Nothing at all to do with hell.
Okay. Well, I look forward to that.
Which is very interesting. Either that or giants, because apparently there's a lot of proof on that. I've been doing some, and there's some, that's really weird. Yeah. I don't know. It was really weird when I was beginning to look into it.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
That's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
hope you
everyone, for tuning in.
Hope you enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. See you next week later. I don't know. Whenever our next episode is. See you then.